What is NATO prediction about the war in Ukraine? How it is going to continue, according to your opinion or predictions?
This will probably take a few more time, and that's bad because the losses for civilian innocent lives, losses on both sides militarily, losses of Russian young troops, that's bad. But despite the rhetoric that we can hear from Moscow, our analysis that this war will continue. We cannot predict for how long, depends on many factors. But we also salute the fact that there are some signals of political potential ways forward. And NATO is calling on Russia to seize this war, to withdraw its troops, and enter in earnest in negotiations with Ukraine.
Are the calls the only thing that you are doing right now, or what is actually NATO doing? What is the new movement in this? What is NATO doing right now against what's happening in Ukraine?
Of course, NATO as an organization has been helping Ukraine since 2014 to modernize its armed forces, to train their special forces, and together with individual allies from NATO, NATO as an organization, we helped the transformation of the Ukrainian military from a post-Soviet army to a NATO standard army. Of course, this is not the only explanation for the success of Ukraine in this fight against Russia, because the bravery, the heroism of the Ukrainian troops is very important. We also, in these very difficult moments, we continue to help Ukraine with the cyber, with resilience, fighting disinformation, with protection equipment, non-lethal equipment. But NATO as an organization is doing a lot, but also individual allies in their national capacity are doing a lot. And we anticipate that this support will continue for Ukraine.
Can we do anything more than we are doing right now?
We are doing more and will continue to do more. Of course, not everything that our Ukrainian friends are asking from us as NATO or countries can be fulfilled immediately. Some of the no-fly zone means...
That's one thing that we said no, but also President Zelensky is asking for more jets, possibly tanks and other systems. Are we ready to do that, or will this be no as well?
No. We are fully respecting and admire President Zelensky's heroism at the helm of his country in such dramatic moments. And while we have to say no to some of his requests, it doesn't mean that we are saying no to the most of his requests. So if you look to the huge list of things that allies do for Ukraine, that's immense. From anti-missile systems, from anti-tank systems, from anti-ship systems, from logistics and ammunition and help. And of course, the high-end requests are more visible. He's also a very good communicator, that we all recognize that. But again, we are NATO, and our number one obligation is to take care of Slovakia, of Romania, of Estonia, of America, of Canada, all of us. So while helping Ukraine, we have also to make sure that while helping really Ukraine, we don't start a war between NATO and Russia, two nuclear superpowers. And that's why some of the things that President Zelensky is asking we do, most of them, if you look at the list, it's a long list of things we do, we'll continue to do, and probably the list will become even longer, but also making sure that we don't lead to escalation. And that's an obligation we have to the 1 billion people, including the people of Slovakia. Defending NATO allies is number one mission.
Yes, when you are talking about defending Slovakia, there is a request that Slovakia would supply its system S-300 to Ukraine, but the Slovak position is that we need to have our skies secured first. So where we are at this problem right now? What is the possible solution? How can Slovak sky be protected if we would give away S-300?
First of all, we respect the decisions of each ally. You're a democracy. You know the best national interest for your country. We fully respect that. Also, we respect the fact that Slovakia is doing so much today, receiving refugees. And your minister, who is the gracious host of this B9 meeting, and I thank him and the Slovakian government for that, is telling us that in terms of refugees per capita, Slovakia is receiving more refugees than even Poland or my home country of Romania. You do a lot. You help them. You're a very solid ally, and we count and trust Slovakia. The discussion about, lending support to Ukraine while leading to make sure that you don't have a gap in your air defenses is something which, again, is legitimate. We understand that. And we trust that your discussions with key allies like America, the fact that Germany and the Netherlands have decided to move here Patriot missiles, high state-of-the-art, will lead in the end to a positive conclusion. But it's not us. NATO is not telling Bratislava what to do or not to do. This is the sovereign right of your country to decide what's best for you. But also the fact that you are showing so much solidarity with Ukraine is something which needs to be applauded, and we support that.
If you say NATO or NATO in Slovakia, many of the people are, some of them are scared, some of them are even protesting in the streets against the presence of NATO troops in Slovakia. How do you respond to such protests?
Listen, I think 2 or 3 days ago, we celebrated 18 years since Slovakia, Romania, the Baltic countries, Bulgaria, and Slovenia, 7 countries, from the Baltic to the Black and to the Adriatic Sea, joined NATO. I was foreign minister of Romania at that time. And I remember that decision basically changed our lives for the better. I don't know about Slovakia, but Romania's GDP in 2004, when we joined, was 4 times smaller than the one today. Without enlarging NATO, EU would have not enlarged. And when I'm talking to my Slovak friends, fully understanding and respecting some sensitivities or some historical or strategic considerations, I'm a Democrat, I respect everyone's position. I would say and ask the young Slovaks or the older Slovaks, men and women, boys and girls, imagine 1 second that Slovakia would not be in NATO today. Imagine yourselves in a situation of not being member of NATO today. And I think that being in NATO is the prerequisite for peace, for stability, for security, for prosperity, for everything you do. So security and prosperity go hand in hand. And I only ask an exercise of imagination what Slovakia would have been doing, or my home country, Romania, if we have listened to Putin and not enlarged NATO. What would have been the situation of the whole of Central Europe today? And if the temptation of Mr. Putin to recreate the Soviet Empire, I was a kid in 1968, and I vividly remember, you're much younger than I am, and probably for you, the shock of this barbaric war by Russia against Ukraine is the similar thing that I felt when I was a kid, when Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia. And this is something that probably the younger generations don't have a recollection of that. I'll tell my son, who's about your age, you remember communists? I said, give me a break with communists. This is not something.
Yes, I understand.
But I'm just trying to convince our Slovak friends that being in NATO means security. Security brings prosperity. And in the world like this, with people like Putin ready to use force to recreate his Russian empire, I think being in NATO is much better than being outside of NATO by any standard.
Can you answer your own question? What would happen if Slovakia or Romania, where you are from, would not be member of NATO right now?
I don't know, but I can judge that Putin's intention is to recreate the Soviet Russian Empire. And I think they're not giving up the idea that they controlled our part of Europe. Not that long time ago. And without the enlargement of NATO, probably would have still have Russian dominance here. If some people would like to live in Russia, I invite young Slovaks to go and live in Russia. Do you prefer to live in Bratislava, this beautiful western city and sophisticated place, or would like to be afraid? You said demonstrations against NATO, very good. But the young Russians are trying to demonstrate against the war in Ukraine, and they get in jail Mr. Navalny is in jail. His political opponents are poisoned. So what kind of life do you want to have? So perhaps I'm a little more let's say, emotional about this because I lived half of my life in communism and dictatorship. And I can tell you that between being part of NATO and the EU and being part of the Russian Empire, there's no way in which you can choose to live like in Siberia or to live like in Bratislava. I think it's an easy choice.
NATO troops are right now in Slovakia, apart from the Slovak army, also the Dutch and the Germans, and there is a talk about a new fight group of NATO in the eastern Slovakia. How long do you think these soldiers will stay in Slovakia? Is it only until the end of the war in Ukraine, or is it going to be long-term presence such as in Estonia or Baltics?
No, today we have a similar coherent presence of NATO on the eastern flank, now with the new battle groups, the one in Slovakia, led by the Czech Republic. I was in Prague just 2 days ago. I thanked our Czech friends and allies, and also your friends, best allies, for taking the lead of this. Today we have a similar or coherent NATO presence from the Baltic, in Poland, in Slovakia, in Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, which I think is great news. But our leaders at the summit in Madrid will have to take decisions, and they will take decisions for a more long-term, more permanent presence of NATO in the East. And this is not the fact that NATO wants to do that, but because Russia is forcing us to adjust our posture because they are so aggressive. So yes, I anticipate a longer-term permanent presence. I cannot indicate which nations, in which proportions will be here, but I see now with great satisfaction. I really showed a map to the foreign ministers just a few minutes ago. And if you look to the 8 battle groups, I think we have more than 25 allied nations participating in the group in Slovakia, in Romania, in Lithuania or Latvia, which shows how much solidarity we have amongst ourselves in NATO. Of course, America is the biggest of our allies, but it's not the only one contributing. Canada is here, Germany, the Netherlands, France, Italy. By the way, I think Italy will be taking over the lead of the Bulgarian battle group. My colleagues are here, I'm looking towards them. France is leading the group in Romania, Czech Republic here. So I think this is great, because this is how we keep each other safe and how we can protect our interests and our populations.
One country, Hungary, does not really seem to be that inside of the efforts to help Ukraine. Viktor Orbán said that he's going to block any efforts to send weapons to Ukraine. He does not allow any weapons going through Hungary to the east. Why do you think he is doing this?
Listen, first of all, we recognize, as I mentioned in the case of Slovakia, in the case of any ally, we fully respect the decisions of allies. We are an alliance of democracies, we work by consensus, and I'm not want to get into something that seems to be quite heated also a few days before the Hungarian elections. I know also in the Visegrad group there are discussions. I know there are some discussions also here in the Bucharest 9 format. But I can say one thing, that when it comes to NATO, we have not seen Hungary blocking anything. I have not seen Hungary blocking European Union sanctions. And if there are national decisions that can be discussed, it's not for NATO to judge allies of what they do. I also know that we receive refugees. But of course, the fact that this topic is so present in the public discussion in Slovakia indicates a conversation that probably will be continued after the elections on Sunday.
One last question about the battle group in Slovakia. How many soldiers can that be, and what are they actually going to do in Slovakia? Is it just that they will be present and basically sit and wait for possible dangers, or are they going to do something?
I mentioned that we had, since 2016, I believe, 4 battle groups in the Baltic area, 3 Baltic countries plus Poland. I visited, Secretary General Stoltenberga visited, we all visited, because now I think they are getting close to the 5th anniversary of those battle groups. I visited those troops. They're not immense in terms of numbers, but they're multinational. And it's a great experience of exercising together, of understanding the strategic culture of different countries. I was outside of Vilnius. Canada was leading that battle group. And we have Germans, and you have, of course, Lithuanians, and we have many others. So the benefit of such battle groups is not only the presence, which is a deterrent, but it's also the fact that you'll be able to exercise, and your troops will be exercised basically every day together with many other allies, thus being much more ready, better equipped, and also learning from each other. I cannot say the dimension of this. I know that in the Slovak parliament there was an approval of something like 3,000 as a top, as a ceiling. Probably there will be something less than that, but more than what we have now in the Baltic countries. So it's up to every battle group to be constituted according to the contributions of the host nation, but also of the countries willing to contribute. So one battle group will be 2,000 people, other could be 1,800, other could be less or more. But this is roughly the dimension for the time being.
Mr. Vice Secretary, thank you very much for the interview.